Imagine starting a new country completely from scratch, freed from any pre-existing economic system, tax laws, or formal government. A bankrupt country with its future and direction completely in the hands of its people. That's the story of Estonia. It was 1991, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and Estonia had just regained its independence. But with few resources and a small population, the country had to find a way forward. With the internet beginning to boom, leaders decided to invest in and build an e-society. The first project was Tiger Leap, which put computers and the internet in every school and got Estonians online fast. By the late 90s, all Estonian schools were online. In 2000, Estonia became the first country in the world to declare internet access as a basic human right. And today, Estonians are connected online through a mobile ID.
Using that ID card, we can do everything. We can vote online in elections. We can declare our taxes. We can register businesses. We can do e-school, e-police, e-cabinet, you name it. And everybody is very used to that.
All of this personal data is protected by technology called blockchain, a decentralized network with countless channels that make it exceedingly difficult to hack. And as a backup, Estonia will create the world's first data embassy in Luxembourg, a storage facility to house an entire backup of Estonia's data capable of rebooting the country in case of a cyber attack. The result is a country that runs like a tech startup. Estonia teaches first graders how to code. It has the world's fastest broadband and holds the records for most startups per person. In 2003, two Estonian friends created Skype, the video calling app. It was sold to Microsoft in 2011 for $8.5 billion, but instead of cashing out, the ex-Skypers reinvested in Estonia. They launched new startups and founded a venture capital fund with their wealth. Creating the future is Estonia's driving project, and increasingly its core business too. With the introduction of e-residence, Estonia is hoping to invite entrepreneurs to invest in the country.
So each person globally can apply and get this e-residency card the same way Estonians have been using that for 17 years. Using that card, e-residents establish company, establish bank account, open different legal and other solutions, and then you can remotely manage and administrate the company, fully online.
So far, just 18,000 people have signed up, but some believe that with 10 million e-residents paying $100 a month each, Estonia would not even need to tax its citizens. It's certainly an ambitious goal. Only a place that started over from scratch could imagine reinventing the whole idea of a country as a place where people could feel at home as much online as where they actually live. We'll see if the rest of the world takes a page from their book.
So welcome to the session of Digital Citizenship, Integration and Participation. I am Birgi, your host today. And we have a very nice panel. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today, mainly about critical thinking, behaving safely, and participation. And who is in the panel? We have Alex Wellman, head of e-residency program. We have Clara Sommier from Google. We have Kyritsis Haris from Greece, member of the Greek Safer Internet Center youth panel. You can wave. Then Sandra Särav. And she has done many things and will be doing many other things also. But now I'm thinking you are sleepless because of the things is going on in what?
Does it work? No? Yes? Okay. Yeah, why I've been sleepless is because the any Maltese people here? No? They gave us a little surprise by telling that, sorry, we have a prime minister, but we don't have ministers. So maybe you can take over the presidency early and head the councils this week. Which meant that all the work I've been doing for the past 2 weeks went to a complete zero, and I had to start work all over again. But the good news is that the presidency of Estonia starts already this week. So this is what she was referring to. That's why the sleepless nights. But what I've been doing, yeah, maybe I should...
Later, we will do the introduction later. But okay. This was a so funny story, so because that's why I'm not to
I'll shut up now. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we have Marlene Franklin, professor of global media and politics from London. And we have also online Raed Jakob from your institution as also. So now I'm gonna give the floor to our panelists. They will tell a little bit about themselves and what they think that should be the topics today. And then we have a lot of questions and we'll see what happens. Marianne, I will give the floor to you.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm representing the Internet Rights and Principles Coalition and also as well as my employer, Goldsmiths, University of London. I have some comments which relate to the 5 questions that were posted on the wiki. Very big questions, very important questions. So I'm developing some ideas from this morning's panel about digital citizenship. And I'm also developing points that were raised last year in Workshop 2 and Workshop 10 in Brussels about how we deal with access for large groups of people who we could call non-citizens or not quite citizens. And those are the points I'd like to address, namely migrants, refugees and asylum seekers who are residents in various ways, shapes and forms in the countries we all are from. So I just want to make a note that Estonia, along with Finland and some other countries who've established free and affordable internet access for all, are taking a big step in the right direction. And I would just like to commend Estonia for that initiative. Fabulous. Because in that sense, Estonia, particularly as our host country, is honouring Article 1 of the Charter of Human Rights and Principles for the Internet that says this: access to and use of the Internet is increasingly indispensable for the full enjoyment of human rights, including the right to freedom of expression, the right to education, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, the right to take part in the government of a country, the right to work, and the right to rest and leisure. The right to access to and make use of the Internet derives from its integral relationship to all of these human rights. So that's my positive point. Now, because we're here, I'd like to make some critical comments, if I may, as a critical friend, because this is how we hopefully can move our ideas forward. The notion here of digital citizenship, I'm understanding more what that might mean, but it can mean many things. And I'm going to address it from a technical point of view, as a sort of invention and an innovation of processes by which people gain or apply for what we call conventionally citizenship. And just to note, residency is not citizenship. It's not the same. The problem is with these technical innovations is they're very quickly separated from the much wider agendas that have to address social exclusion and inclusion. And the problem is, as governments and businesses, particularly in schools and health institutions, are reconfiguring the form as well as the substance of civic participation, they have to, because more and more people are leading their everyday life online. But we need a holistic understanding. And this understanding of the whole human, technological, economic, political and social aspect are actually quite clearly articulated in the outcomes of the WSIS process in 2003 and 2005, even more particularly articulated and developed in how UNESCO is developing the action points from the WSIS process. And if you read carefully, between the lines and in the manifest content of the UN General Assembly resolution in 2015, these reiterate all that technology cannot be designed and deployed alone. It has to be in context of sustainability, environmental and development, and of course all those human rights, norms and standards to which we aspire, as well as to which we're supposed to aspire. So this is my point. You can roll out all the programs you like, anywhere. E-government, e-residency, notions of digital citizenship, digital ways of doing your tax, and say, look, it makes things easier. But my points today are we have to be careful because they can actually end up making things more complicated and also create more rather than less exclusion if you only focus on one particular aspect of the process, namely digitizing authentication or digitizing the legitimation you need to prove that you are who you are. So here, blockchain is not the silver bullet to resolve authenticity and identity. It creates in itself another set of implications and consequences. For those populations who are in this category of non or not quite citizens, or undesirable populations, contested populations, these problems become even more acute, particularly as they try and gain legitimacy in the land of the host country. But it's also the case for existing citizens. And I'm speaking here about the digital ID, the Digi-ID. Some of you may have noticed that the steps you need to take to authenticate who you are increasing. They're not decreasing. So you now have to do step 1, and then in the Netherlands particularly, there's now a second step to authenticate the authentication. So exclusion can happen at every point. So rather than creating lower thresholds of entry, we're getting higher thresholds of entry. Okay? So governments need to understand this. So I have some other points. I'm not sure how we're supposed to proceed. Do we say it all at once, or do we come back just before?
No.
How do you want to proceed in terms of...
like to proceed in that everybody has a little speech,
Okay,
and
then we
then
come
we're
back.
going to
No.
have questions. But you made a lot of interesting things. I write it down, rights and access and citizenship, that we have only one world. Riot is sadly not online, so...
Oh, hopefully he comes online and shortly. Let's just keep track. But I just finish my first by saying we need to understand which comes first, digitization or citizenship. The big problematic is, what is citizenship? And is there a narrow understanding, or is there a wider understanding? And that's what this workshop is addressing, as I understand those questions. Thank you. I'll continue later when I can.
Okay, thank you. Alex.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Just to give you a little background information, the director of the e-residency program, Kaspar Kordius, was supposed to be here today, but he's celebrating the birth of his first child a few days ago. So I've been asked to step in, and hopefully I can do a good job in his honor. So a little bit about myself. Maybe you can tell, but I'm not Estonian. I'm from the US. I've been working here for over half a year now on the e-residency program. And do we have any e-residents in the room at all? Okay, I figured there must be a few in this crowd. So if you saw the video, I sent them there, before we had the panel, we were thinking of what we could show for a video, and I thought this one from Fortune magazine that was done last month was actually a really good overview of sort of what Estonia has done to reach this point. But as you know, in Estonia, most business can be conducted online using the secure digital identity. In 2014, there was sort of this idea that, can we open this to more people? And it really came from, I think, the startup culture here, sort of how to scale your business, or in this case, how to scale your country. So in late 2014, we started accepting the first e-residents. And I guess it's important to sort of talk about what e-residency isn't. As the previous speaker said, there's a big difference between residency and citizenship, and there's an even bigger difference between e-residency. The main benefit of e-residency is the ability to access a digital identity for Estonia. And since 2014, we've had over 20,000 people from 138 different countries sign up and become e-residents of Estonia. And the primary benefit so far has been access to the business environment. So I think, almost 3 years ago when e-residency was started, no one really knew what the benefits would be. And we'd like to think of it as a platform, and we're continually adding services to this platform. But of course, the main benefit so far has been the ability to start and run a location-independent, EU-based business totally online from anywhere in the world. So that's sort of the goal we've set for ourselves, is democratizing entrepreneurship and giving people around the world access to the infrastructure they need to be successful entrepreneurs. And so far, e-residents have started 3,000 companies in Estonia. And I know usually when we talk about technology, and there's always has to be an Uber reference, right? Whenever you talk about technology. So you're familiar with Uber. It's the largest, or one of the largest transportation companies, but they don't own any cars or vehicles. And then another example, Airbnb, one of the largest accommodation providers around the world, but they don't actually own any property. So Estonia could actually be the largest country with population-wise without actually having physical residents here. So it's really interesting. So I'm happy to talk here today about sort of the future and how e-residents fit into the Estonia, and especially as Estonia only has 1.3 million citizens. So in the next few years, we could see e-residents actually exceed the number of actual citizens of Estonia. And I think when you start to think about the impacts of this, really, what can happen and what that means for digital citizenship and digital identity in general. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I wrote it down, benefits from digitalizations. And also we have also some pictures running in the background. So this is my critical view because I did my PhD in digital safety. So maybe somebody is inspired of that. But Clara.
Thank you. So yes, Clara from Google and then YouTube as well. I'll focus in my short presentation on accessibility because some of you have already heard me speaking maybe this morning with my other co-panelist on digital skills and critical thinking. So don't worry, I won't repeat myself. So yes, because if we are starting to talk about digital citizenship, the key is to make sure that internet is accessible for everyone, that everybody has access to this platform where they can express themselves. And this is something that is really in the DNA of our company, make sure that internet is for everyone. So just 3 short points to start and kick off the discussion. First, pretty basic and simple, but it's worth repeating it again and again. We just have to make sure to preserve an open internet. And we see that there are still many threats that are coming our way in that direction. And the fear that we have should not overshadow the opportunities of the digital world as a world of an open expression and citizenship. So first point I wanted to make. The second one is we have to help people find their voice online. There is huge potential for everybody without having to have any support or any infrastructure to just say what they're thinking and express themselves. And that's something that we try to support and we're very proud of, especially on YouTube, on the big community that has been created with lots of people who care about different issues and make their voice heard. We start campaigning on YouTube and we try to support them through a program called Creators for Change. I don't know if some of you have heard about it. So we try to support the YouTubers. We give them production grants, facilities to shoot videos, to create social change. So if they have a campaign, something they care about, promote tolerance in the world, a fight against climate change, raise awareness, we try to help them to be more visible and out there so that we can really have this digital citizenship online. And the last point, building a bit on what has been said, is if we want internet to be accessible for everyone and everybody to be a citizen of this digital world, we need to think of more disadvantaged groups that don't have an immediate access to the internet. And so it's a philanthropic arm called google.org that is working on that especially. So there are 2 main streams maybe to that part. First, we try to work with disadvantaged group. So the way we work with them is that we will work with civil society, support their project for engineer, so we can bring our technical expertise to their project, and of course through grants so that they can happen. So for instance, we work in Germany with local association on the integration of refugees. So we provide them with Chromebook, for instance, so that they can continue learning and engage. And the second group that I think we should always bear in mind when we talk about this topic is also the disabilities. We have to make sure that everybody has access to the internet and build in the product from the start, make them accessible. And this is really key. And on that, we also have many projects, just to mention one that we're doing in the UK. We are working on the beacon technology. So the beacon is just sending signal for blind people, so that they can take the subway. So meaning they can, with an app, go in the subway and they will receive signals from the beacon on their mobile phone to tell them which direction to go, watch out there are stairs, go right, go left. So yes, so that's the key message and the key topic for us here, the accessibility and make sure that internet can be for everyone.
Thank you. I've written down open internet and having a voice. My students all want to be a scientist and a YouTuber now. So thank you. So Harris.
Okay, my name is Harris. I'm from Greece and I study informatics in the University of Athens. I believe I'm here to represent the youth opinions about the digital citizenship matters. We'll talk later.
Okay, so you did
a great discussion later.
Thank you. Youth voice. And now we have Sandra. Now you can have your story.
Okay, I'm not going to tell the full story, otherwise it's going to take too much time. So what you meant by saying that I've done many, many things. So normally people ask me what I do. I have different identities. Firstly, I'm a PhD student in University of Lausanne, Switzerland. Secondly, I'm a junior researcher in Tallinn University of Technology. I also teach there, EU law, legal framework of e-governance. And thirdly, I'm the EU advisor for digital affairs in the Estonian Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications. So hence the presidency talk beforehand. But I'm not going to talk about myself anymore, just focusing on this role that I have as a researcher or a junior researcher, a legal scholar.
appropriate thing to do first is to ask what is digital citizenship in the first place. So no one has mentioned this here, I think. So what I would say as an Estonian, because I think I'm the only Estonian in this panel, yeah. So for me, being a digital citizen is meaning the way I interact with the Estonian government and certain private service providers. So if any EU national of any EU member state is also a citizen simultaneously of the European Union, I would like to believe that any Estonian citizen is also a digital citizen. It's because the way we vote or declare our taxes, access our medical records, etc. Everything is done digitally. I just checked this morning, we have more than 600 million digital authentications since the ID cards were issued to us, so since 2002. So taken down to my next identity or pillar, which means a Swiss PhD student. So yes, I'm a digital citizen in Estonia, but let's say, what does it mean for me as a Swiss PhD student? It means nothing, besides the fact that the Swiss have been making our ID cards since 2002. So basically, when I applied for the PhD program and I was accepted, I had to go to Switzerland, meaning I had to fly from Tallinn to Munich, Munich to Geneva, take the train from Geneva to Lausanne, give one physical signature, come back the same route, just €1,000 poorer, you know. If I would have applied, let's say, as of fall 2018, then, and for any EU member state PhD program, then it would have meant that thanks to EIDAS regulation, which I think you're all familiar with, I should have been able to do this with only one digital signature. So there's the difference. So yes, I'm a digital citizen in Estonia, but it doesn't apply cross-border. So my problem here is that if we are all becoming global citizens, why don't we have global digital citizenship? And then moving to next continent, in India, for the past 8 years, they have been issuing this 12-digit identity code. And if India has 1.3 billion citizens, so 3 zeros more than in Estonia, they're also issuing this digital citizenship. And Indian people previously, or currently, only 65 million people there have physical passports. But now over 90% of the citizens have these digital identity codes, meaning that they have access to services which they never had access to before, because they weren't identifiable by the government. So you see, the digital citizenship or this digital code can also provide you this interaction with the government. But if in Estonia we are really satisfied with what the government gives us, I mean, more or less and to most extent, then actually the Indian people are suing their government. They're suing against this law, which they say they don't want to give away their biometric data to the government. They think that now the government acts as a huge surveillance tool, and then they don't want to give their fingerprints or iris prints. So, you know, there are differences, but what I think is that it's not about the institutions, the government system, the citizens. I mean, all this, yes, but it's all about trust. You know, the government must trust its people to allow them this digital citizenship, and the citizens must trust their government in order to use those services. So I think the digital citizenship, to a large extent, is about trust. And this is my introduction, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So I write that future, quicker, smarter, and safer.
Sure, yeah.
So now we have mics here. We have mic here. We have one mic here. So who would like to ask a question? No one. There's nobody in the room. So what would be the problems with citizenship and non-citizens, Marianne? What is the solutions, obstacles? Can we have a mic here?
Yes. Citizenship is traditionally and legally premised on physical territories. So the convenience that we all experience when we don't have to spend €1,000 to sign something, we all rejoice in that. But we're just the top layer of the chocolate cake, so to speak. The rest of the cake is actually not able to get on a plane, and the necessary payoffs are not automatic just by accessing. Authentication and legitimation are culturally embedded. So I fully understand the Indian populace's objections to what's going on. The means by which you verify someone to prove who they are doesn't necessarily have to entail biometrics. Who said that it had to be biometrics? So there's a whole sort of technological rush into technologizing processes and relationships that are very deeply culturally embedded. Now, I don't want to sound like a technophobe, but to be critical, we do need to be aware that the higher the tech, the higher the threshold of entry. And when it comes to citizenship, we're dealing with a political issue, not simply a technical issue. So for all those who are in that grey zone, for instance, those who cross borders as a matter of a way of life, who do not regard themselves citizens or members of one country or one culture, they are multiple citizens of many cultures. My feeling is the way the digital design is emerging is actually narrowing our understanding of belonging and restricting our understanding of inclusion, which is counterintuitive to the promises that the technology may hold. So my point is that this goes right back to the very first phase of design. You design for those who are most likely to be left out, not for those who are already in. And I think that's the challenge for governments who really want to offer radical ways to facilitate access to key services. So the Estonian example is, as I read it, very, very fantastic, but for legitimately currently understood Estonians and those who have a relationship to Estonia. But if you've just arrived and you're struggling to get residency in any part of the EU, are these procedures open to you? Anybody going through these procedures, and I have as well, because I'm not an EU citizen, discovers that there's separate rules. There isn't just one rule. So my final point in this case is, do we live in a global world where borders don't matter? Some of us do, but the majority of us do not.
So we had a very nice picture here where there is old man and lady with a mouse, what they have catched now, and maybe, kas saad liigutada edasi natukene? Veel? So what we're going to do with... So inclusion issues are really important. But we had questions.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on two things. One is digital citizenship across borders. I think the way to encourage digital citizenship across borders is to make sure that all countries sign up to the same underlying principles about how they give digital citizenship to their citizens, which is a bit of a mouthful. And I know I've done this to people before, but I think these principles of identification on the internet for a sustainable development, orchestrated by the World Bank Group, but including UNESCO and many other organizations, particularly coming from the third world, has 10 very important principles that chime with everything that everyone has said. On inclusion, universal coverage and accessibility, design, robust, secure, responsive, and good governance, safeguarding data privacy, establishing clear mandates and accountability, and enforcing legal and trust frameworks. If one knows that all countries are doing that, and it is totally compatible with the spirit of GDPR, but done in proper plain English on a side of A4, which makes it a hell of a lot better, I think then the digital citizenship from different countries will be much more easily accepted cross borders, and that's really important. But I've got another point that I'd like to make and ask the panel about, and that is, for me, citizenship has much more than your nationality. It is about being a good moral and ethical person. And so that comes back to teaching people from an early age how to behave responsibly and safely online. And that is one of the things that I know Estonia has done really well in teaching people from a young age how to be responsible, safe and secure online. And it also speaks to that, I've got the mouse, what shall I do with it? Because a lot of the things that older people are frightened about going online, are losing their identity, and not knowing how to stay safe online. So you have to teach young people right from an early age, but you also have to teach older people how to use new services safely and well. So I would very much like the panel's opinion on that.
Okay, I will take the first comment. Estonia is now soon ready to launch our new curricula in informatics. And it is really from the 1st to 9th graders, there will be digital safety curricula. And also we're going to do in a gymnasium level curricula for that. But yes, what we're going to do with the older people? Maybe somebody wants to comment, at least in Europe.
I think it's a good idea to have some government agency to go to the homes of an old man or a citizen who don't have a digital education, to teach them how to use these platforms, to be easier for them to pay taxes or make any arrangements from from their computers or with their kids maybe.
So I think also that children that we taught in the schools can go and teach their parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very good practice. Yep.
You know, could not agree more. So generally, everything that has to do with the digital skills and digital literacy early in school is essential. That's why we really try to support those projects that are done by the civil society as much as we can. And on that, I think it's also important to stress the dimension. We had a bit this debate this morning of doing it online and offline. So to have an online part, but also a part where you do training on the site. Because I think that's a key difference, and we really have to combine both. And on senior people, I could not agree more. I'm actually doing a volunteering project in rest homes to teach to older people or to use the internet to connect with their family and exchanges. So I totally support it.
Mm-hmm. In Estonia, we had many years ago this project, Be a Part, and this was for elderly people to come in the schools, and then we would teach them how to use internet and Word, Excel, and then also digital signing. And we did also that my students were teaching the elderly people. We had 3 meetings. First time the elder people listened. Next time they meet at their home or in the library. And the third time the older people came and asked questions that my young students couldn't answer about Skype and a lot of things that my students didn't use. They used Facebook or Rate or something like that. So it has been very funny. And the other thing, it has been that in these trainings, a lot of older ladies came. Men are still missing. So they are in the shops, but they are not in the internet. So, but yes.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on a few things. First of all, you said that Estonians know how to behave responsibly and safely online. Do you know the European Court of Justice biggest case, Selfie v. Estonia, about the online hate speech? So it comes from Estonia. So anyway, there's that. Regarding including elderly people, well, I gave my grandma 2 years ago a smartphone for Christmas, and I lived briefly in Brussels. And then she would send me pictures of Grandpa shoveling snow in the wintertime through Viber. She should have used WhatsApp because it's end-to-end encryption, but okay. So anyway, and then when they had the wedding anniversary with Grandpa, then they took turns to take pictures of each other and send to me to Brussels. So yeah, I mean, we are including. And also, my grandpa calls me a few months ago saying that he needs to renew his license, but he lives 40 kilometers from the nearest office where you can do that. So he says that you're coming to Kilingi-Nõmme, so anyway, bring your computer with you. We're going to do it online because I know you can do it online. So it's about showing them and teaching them that you can use those services. And also, I think it's much more secure if you do it with one identity, because in the online world, we can have several identities. I mean, I'm one person in the Estonian research portal where, you know, I say that I'm doing a PhD, I have 42 research articles, I've done this and that. And then I have a different profile on Facebook, and then I have a different profile on Instagram. And maybe on Instagram, I only connect to people I want to show certain things I'm doing on holidays, perhaps. But then again, we should still have only one actual identity. The social media profile, this relates to our behavior, but the identity remains the same. So in this way, I think it's perfect that Estonia has made mandatory our ID card, and all these services that we access are done through one identity. So this minimizes the threat of identity theft, let's say.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. Oh. Then we have a question there, and then you.
I hear you, but we're here to try and unpack some of these assumptions. Does having only one identity in a digital form really protect us from identity theft? It may, but what would be required to be sure about that? Secondly, is having a tax number an identity? So I think sometimes we might have to be aware that the more that's my point, the diversity and the different levels of accesses of use and communicative cultures are being, if we're not careful, being squeezed out. So eventually it's only one sort of identity, it's only one sort of way of going online, it's only one sort of way to discuss online, there's only one set of morals that count. So before we know it, we're actually undoing the very premise on which these 10 principles that we've just had presented to us are based, to allow for variety and diversity, but also to be robust and transparent. So I think government, service providers, private and public, really the bar is raised here, and I'd like to have a little bit more discussion about whether one single digital identity is the way to verify everything forever, and whether it is that safe from identity theft. Because if you just have the one ID and it's stolen, you're really in trouble.
I like that you are more like an artist and she's more like a lawyer. But you had a question.
Hi, my name is Umit Öztürk. I'm the coordinator of a UK-based charity called Euro-Mediterranean Resources Network. We help people from diverse communities coming from all over the world, living in the UK, and helping to defend their rights. Our observations are about the discrimination, bias, and also the issue of transparency and scrutiny. Having access to digital signature or digital citizenship, in our opinion, at the current picture, will not apply to all, even if technically or on paper, if it applies to all, there is always a risk that the system will train its artificial intelligence system to put additional surveillance, additional questions, additional discretionary measurements towards some groups of people. For instance, at present, in the case of UK, the banks, including banks solely serving to charities, not-for-profit organizations, are asking the trustees, board members, to clarify their current citizenship, if there is any change of citizenship, whether they are thinking of making any digital transaction to the other countries, and everything under the excuse of national security, prevention of money laundering, and funding terrorism. So having a kind of digital signature for everybody, in our opinion, will not prevent this conscious or unconscious bias or discrimination. And the same applies to employment rights. Even if you have a digital ID, if you don't have technically full citizenship of a country, then you may not apply to all jobs. Some jobs require that you are a full citizen by registration or by naturalization. And digital learning opportunities, there is a discrimination in this field as well. Home students, EU students, and overseas students, they pay different fees. If you are an actual physical student arriving in the UK, you pay 3 times more because you are not a EU citizen. You don't have EU citizenship, or you don't have British citizenship. And so if this continues to apply on digital distance learning, I'm trying to find a polite word rather than rip-off. It's unfair charging your fee system. And also because of the unfortunate events around the continents, around the world, national governments, including the UK government, are always finding an excuse to restrict civil rights and liberties, and with the excuse of national security, the data gathering and monitoring of individuals or groups of people who belong to certain ethnic origin, who belong to certain culture or faith, are susceptible to, and they are vulnerable groups, they are susceptible to more surveillance, and in a way as if the system asks the service providing bodies, educational authorities, local authorities, healthcare providers to become the voluntary police on behalf of the system, for instance, asking school children to clarify their country of birth, regardless of whether they are citizen, whether they have mixed parentage, one parent being British, one from another country, who naturalized later. So there is this way of the culture of boiling the frog slowly. And the last point is the concerns about the collective use of the proposed suggested global digital citizenship. Not every regime, not every government in an individual, in any given individual country behaves in the same way. And states, this is my personal opinion, state by its nature is an oppressive and very suspicious institution. So if many member states comply with the rules of ethics, rules of transparency and fairness towards citizens, you cannot guarantee this for every other country. So the question here is, do you think it's possible to set up a well-functioning scrutiny body to make sure that this kind of data through digital citizenship will not be abused by one or more national national governments? Thank you very much. Sorry, it was a bit long.
Thank you. I think it's a question to Google. I'm sorry.
On the scrutiny body and making sure that the governments won't abuse the data.
Yes, but it seems like that in internet we have a one world. And then there's the countries that want to meddle with that.
Yes.
But Google is providing the one world already. Yes, so you have the freedom.
That's true that we are trying to keep the internet as global as we can. And we've seen some things that you've been describing. We've been seeing it in some countries that there are some attempts to nationalize internet and the way we see the internet and operate. And this is something that is rising. And we see even more in many countries. And this is something that we're trying to push back against, because we think the benefit of internet is to being global. You have to respect sometimes the local culture when there are some local sensitivities, that makes sense. But for the rest, all the rights are global and should stay so. So it's something we're defending, and we're also defending the data that we're transmitting to governments in terms of the surveillance that has been explained. So we only give the data to the governments if there is a due process, a legal process, and we only transmit data that are proportionate. We will never transmit the key to your full Gmail account to a government just because they ask for it. So we really try to push back to defend your privacy and the freedom of expression online.
Sandra?
Sorry, you were... Okay, I have been talking a lot, but okay, just because what I proposed was not that everyone will have one digital citizenship. It's that those services that we use, or that the countries would mutually recognize each other's e-services or solutions, so that they are interoperable. such as we're trying to build in Europe, in the EU with the EuroDIG regulation, which would start, comes into effect from 2018 fall, which I referred to it earlier. It means that it's not just digital signature, it's using the cross-border services, and that we mutually recognize and are able to authenticate each other's EID systems. So it's about interoperability, not that we have one common system. It's like in Estonia, we have the X-Road system. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. It basically means that different government services and private service providers are connected to each other's databases, that when you need access to another database's information, you pose a request to do it, and then you have to be accepted, and then you can use this information there. And as an Estonian, I can go and I can see from the Estonian state portal who has accessed my information. So maybe a doctor has accessed my medical records without my permission, and then I can take action. And when I talked about the identity scheme and controlling this with EIDs that will be interoperable, I mean, this is what I see. I don't propose one digital citizenship. I propose interoperability, cross-border.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit maybe about some of your points regarding discrimination and making sure people have access to the services they need. So one thing with the e-residency program I think we're trying to do is just that, give people around the world access to a digital identity, and it happens to be in Estonia. But I know there's some concerns and some discussion here about, you know, one world citizenship or one world digital identity, but I don't see that happening. And I think with e-residency, for example, we see actually in the future countries competing for digital citizens or for you know, subscribers to their digital identity schemes. So Estonia is the first country to offer e-residency, which offers a digital identity to anyone in the world. But just last month, Azerbaijan announced a similar program. And then there's discussions of our neighbors, Lithuania starting their own program, the Netherlands starting their own program, places like this. So I think actually countries will in the future compete for digital residents, and this will sort of be a mechanism that can help police and solve some of these problems. And also, I just wanted to talk about accessing services. One thing with e-residency, very concretely, that we're doing, you know, in Ukraine, for example, it's Ukrainians cannot access PayPal, but with e-residency in Estonia, they can access a PayPal account for their business. And things like this, just very, you know, concrete, solving problems for people is really exciting.
Okay, you know who wants to really have access with us is Raed. Can we switch the video? Hello, Raed.
Hello, good afternoon.
Right, your webcam is not on.
Oh.
Hello.
Yep. Hello, good afternoon, and greetings from Cold Smith University of London. Apologies, I have some technical problems from my end. So maybe I was not able to catch up from the first maybe a few minutes of the discussions. But I thought maybe one issue that I can add to the discussion, maybe to catch up also what we have just talked about, interoperability, discrimination, of having an equity, e-residency and e-society. It sounds such a great thing to do. But I thought maybe we can just highlight something regarding maybe a group of people who might be discriminated. Specifically, I'm talking about identification and authentication of documents. In the process of how, for example, applying for the e-residency, of course, is something that can go beyond the national level of the country. So we are talking about here different maybe versions, what constitute an identification card, and how this can make things more difficult or more easy for some people. For example, I also maybe thought to share some personal experience as non-European, I'm here resident in the UK and in Europe. What constitute for a valid identification document, and how we can envision probably a mechanism for verification of these documents and make it accessible not only for people maybe in Europe and North America, but also maybe for people who are in other parts of the world, and might be their documents maybe under if not will be, for example, accounted as the standards here in Europe. So this, for example, applies for could be residents in Europe, students, foreign workers, and of course the refugees who even sometimes lack such a documentation, or it could be also stateless people who even maybe they don't have a country, have some documentation. So for this reason, I thought it might be helpful to harness such a benefit of an e-residence and e-society. And maybe I just prefer to use this terms because citizenship maybe has an annotation to be a citizen within the country. But I like very much the approach and that for towards the e-residence and e-society, and how this can how we can maybe try to have more inclusion for as much people to have such a digital identity as possible that can facilitate perhaps some economic or other life activities of these people, whether they were in Europe or other North America or another part of the world. So that was mainly the main maybe issue I would like maybe to share and to discuss in this afternoon.
So thank you. And we have a question.
So the first thing that I would like to address is the fact that education in terms of privacy when it comes to the educational system itself, when it comes to high schools and schools, might actually be irrelevant in a world where you cannot actually rely on your privacy. I mean, most of the education is probably going to be based on mainstream operating systems and casual means to protect yourself. But there's a couple of really good arguments against that. First of all, I cannot rely on an institution or a legal frame or authority to protect me as long as there's 14-year-olds in my country that can hack their systems and can hack institutions, so their credibility is flawed from that point of view. Secondly, I don't know if you're aware, but in most of the East European countries, you don't really need a court mandate in order to obtain somebody's private information and to access their computer and use that in a court of law, which means that you do not have the right for
to get your information without, okay.
The presumption of innocence, which is weird. So in terms of privacy, there might be a couple of issues, and I don't think you can educate people towards that end. I think you might be able to educate yourself, but as long as there's a big monopoly in terms of how computers work and what people have access to, and people don't use alternative means to it, we're going to have a big issue with casual computer users. And that's not something that's going to be implemented soon in the educational systems. We've been trying that through alternative projects for not for underage students, and we keep being denied from doing that from the centralized curriculums in my country, at least in Romania. Thank you.
When I visited 3 years ago one summer school in privacy and security, the main issue was there's no privacy anymore. And then we did a picture, and if they shared the picture online, everybody circled the black dots. It was so funny again. But do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you very much. You had that cartoon about the kids not being able to connect, about the teacher. I think that illustrates part of the thing we perhaps need to think about. What are the alternatives within the design? What is the design's backup? What happens when these systems crash? We just had the British Airways example in London, or across the world. The whole of the British Airways infrastructure crashed. We've also had the huge global ransomware attack. And as health records become digitized and requiring a form of authentication to access your digital records, and that crashes. So these systems are not only more complex, but arguably, technical engineers, please correct me, they're more sensitive to disruption. So I know that it's a system engineer puzzle to make them robust and resilient at one end of the infrastructure. But at the other end, is it possible to develop and enjoy the advantages of doing this online and digitizing certain processes, but also to have backups that include the lo-fi option, like because what happens, I've seen it in classes, I've seen students dependent on a PowerPoint presentation, I've seen academics dependent on being online for their presentation, it crashes, they do not know what to do. So are we designing backups for when it doesn't work? Because it will one day not work. So that's my point. If we get over-dependent on one thin funnel technically and we lose sight of the other technical layers required, we can end up with bottlenecks and more problems at the end of the road. So in terms of a design term, I'm interested in the designers in the room, and I can see two at least in front of me. How is that translated into a design paradigm for ensuring the individual, the organization, and the system that supports that relationship work? And when they do not work, what are the backups and the alternatives available? Is there anybody who could share their experiences?
And it's not only the health records, the digital signature. It's very sensitive data. And may the servers of the state be secure, but if the end user machine, every citizen laptop is not secure, because they don't know, many of the citizens don't know how to use their laptops securely. How can we be sure that the information won't get stolen?
Yeah, we will be hacked, and the question is what we're going to do when it happens. Probably not that systems will fail. So, do you have any idea?
So, to go with the digital signature, first of all, Estonian digital signature is not laptop dependent. It's a public key infrastructure. It's a separate system that's connected to the microchip that's either on your ID card or on your mobile ID. And it's a two-way authentication system. And it doesn't happen within the laptop. It happens above somewhere. So before, someone mentioned what happens when we lose the one identity we have, the identity card. Then again, the Estonian identity system is not connected with this one physical card. It's connected to your personal number or your personal code that's assigned to you when you're born. So I have a mobile ID, I have a physical ID card. You can also have just the ID card that's not for physical authentication or identification. So this authentication and digital signature system, it's not dependent merely on some physical assets. And then there were some other points I wanted to raise that you had. So what if the system crashes? Estonia has come up with the digital embassies. What if the e-voting system is interfered with? But think about the physical voting. So you go somewhere in a booth, you write something on a piece of paper, and then you give this piece of paper to some person you don't know, and then it's put in a box, in a ballot box, and then it's put somewhere at the back of a truck, and it's taken somewhere you don't know, and you trust this system more than your two-way authenticated given vote that you do with your ID card. So that's my question. Yeah. Okay.
The issue probably is that we can make our systems very secure, and then there's no electricity. Yeah. Nothing works. Yeah. But the problem nowadays is more that the human side of the things are design fault. We are the mistake.
I'm enjoying the provocation. It makes me sound like a real diehard analog phobe here, but no, analog crazy person. The thing about why people trust paper voting, pen and pencil, is because there are generations of monetary checks and balances and visible controls in place, and even they of course don't work. That's why you have electoral monitors. What is not yet in place is this assumption that because it's technical, because it's digital, it is automatically better. It is not automatically better. It depends on the design. There are really crap, excuse my language, really rubbish applications out there being peddled as better. There's this whole normative assumption we've got to be careful about, that because it's digital, because it's computerized, it's better. Not necessarily. It depends. And I think once we understand that, we'll understand that the reason why the Dutch electoral voting, they can be hacked. The fact that things can be hacked by all sorts of agents is a very real issue. But there are ways with traditional elections, pen and paper, boxes, that we have, generations of ways of monitoring, some better than others. So I think this is a huge mistake to just assume because it's technically possible, it's better. It's all down to the design. I want to know about how the designs are being designed better that include the disadvantaged citizens, the homeless person who's forgotten their ID, who hasn't got a card. You can't get into a library anymore without proof of address. You can't get a bank account anymore without proof of address. And they're all linked to digital forms of authentication. And you're in this constant vicious circle. So those of us inside the magic circle, everything's fantastic. I'm totally with you. But I'm talking about the people who are outside the magic circle. And there are more people outside the magic circle than in. And banking, to make banking digital would disadvantage something like 2/3 of the world's population who do not have a bank account. So that's a rough statistic. Someone please correct me, it's easily looked up. But a large number of people don't have a bank account.
I just need to give one comment. I mean, of course I agree that no system is perfect, but for people trusting pen and paper, I come from the USSR, and I only have 2 words here, or 3 words, Crimean 2014 elections.
Okay. I'm a very digital person. All my things are online. I use a lot of digital things. But I can't get into Estonian startups because when I go there, I show my ID card or whatever. They don't want it. They want my email. I will not give my email. So I can't get in there. So, what? But you had a question.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Evaldas Rupkus from International Youth Service in Germany, and we are working on a Horizon 2020 project, EuroDIG, Tools and Tips for Mobile and Digital Youth Participation for Young People. So we are working with a more specific audience, so to say, and feel free also to join us on our Open Summit in Berlin beginning of December, where we'll talk about youth e-participation in Europe. But here I'm also for the 3rd keyword that was on the title of the workshop, which was participation. And I'm not sure, and I'm a bit surprised that since we are so phony about democracy crisis right now, the only thing what I hear here are services and actually e-governance. However, I don't really see where the citizens are. Yeah, so citizenship for me is something a bit more than signing or authenticating myself. So my question is going into the direction of, is it really so? Is e-participation the next step after digital citizenship or part of it? And the other thing is what we see from our experience now. A couple of years we have been implementing e-participation projects with young people European-wide. And it's not always a success, and it's very hard to find good success stories. Why? Because we have too many failed promises for young people, and they are losing their trust in the system. And my question is, do you have any ideas or recipes how we can deal with that? So the first step of young people joining the world of citizens who can also give their vote, but not necessarily only on e-voting, but also on deliberation, on becoming a real citizens and part of the community. Do you see this as the further way? And what would you say are the determining factors?
So, Clara, you talk about voice and the freedom and the people. May you comment?
Yes, so I strongly believe in e-participation, but for that you have to create first a space where the debate is possible before people can participate. So for me that would be the first point that we really have to achieve, and I personally do not feel we've already achieved it so far. But I hope we'll be able to help in that regard, because internet can really be this incredible space where we can all have our voice, and that's what we're really committed to defend, so that at a later stage we can really achieve e-participation. Because we've seen that we're very lucky, we're part of the magic circle. Even here, we are lucky, we can all discuss together which kind of internet we want to have. But this is a much more global discussion that we should be having. Everybody should have their word and their say for instance, even for a company like us, we should hear from them what they want us to do, what is right, what isn't right, the way we behave, because we don't pretend we always have it right. So, and I do feel that in a lot of spaces, even a very controversial content, but hate speech, there isn't a global discussion of what is acceptable or not online. Where is the line that should be drawn between freedom of expression and making sure that there isn't any horrible content on internet? And this is the kind of debate that I wish we had more, so we had clearer indication for everyone which direction we want internet to take. And on the mistrust of the citizens and the young people, if I may, for me, also from my personal experience, I have the impression that you can only counter that if people have the impression that when they speak it matters, that they're heard. So it's really, there's something to do on the political level. And I also do believe strongly in the power of role models. So if we have also a younger generation that can carry this voice over, and that young people respect that they will hear them and listen and see that they also have a voice that can be expressed.
So, Haris, you want to comment?
You know, the referendum of 2015 in Greece cost, I think, 20 million euros. We have a ready digital platform. We can do referendums for many things because young people want to participate in the actions of the state. And I believe it's good to have a digital citizenship that provides us with the vote for no cost. Because in Greece we have no money to do a referendum for everything.
Marianne, what's...
Yes, I think it's a very important point. It's about who participates and where. And I just wanted to remind myself as well that when we're talking about large groups of people, populations like those who have housing difficulties, who are literally homeless, those who are arriving in severe conditions of malnutrition and dehydration from boats, there are also IT professionals amongst those groups. As a homeless coordinator once told me, when they got online, he said that was a geek fest back there. So to assume that one population is either technophobe or technophile is in itself something we have to be aware of. So for me, my answer would be participation needs to happen in many ways, on many levels, in many forms of digital and combined digital, in many forms of open spaces. So again, I want to get away from the either or. But you're right, it isn't just about signing on. But my problem is that it soon will become just about signing on if we're not careful. And that will supposedly count for everything. It's not enough.
Okay, question?
Hi, Bernhard from Young Pirates of Europe here. I didn't want to touch upon e-voting first, but I'm going to leave a comment as well on that, because I think that even though I'm a very technophile person, I would say, I am fairly skeptical about e-voting because it introduces many new problems, including that how do you even know that, for example, the computers of your population aren't infected by a botnet? You don't know that in the first place. And if everyone clicks on yes for an election, but the bot then votes for no for you, you have no means of actually controlling that vote. And there are more such problems, and I think that we also have to ask the question, what is actually the benefit? Obviously, it sounds hip and cool to vote with your e-devices, but in the end, it boils down to participation in the vote, and there you don't have, like there are studies on that e-voting doesn't increase participation in the vote. There are already good systems in place for voting. Why would we want to change them if there is no actual benefit for us? Other than, of course, yes, it's less inconvenient to not go to the voting ballot, but still that doesn't happen on a daily basis. It's such an overcomplication of a very straightforward system, I would say. But the point I was actually trying to make is that the colleague over here, I forgot his name, mentioned that there might be a future not too far away that there are countries competing with each other for different forms of residencies. And especially under the light that currently the Estonian e-residency program is mainly targeting businesses for being as easy as possible to establish their businesses in that country, I feel that might lead to a negative spiral where we have competition on the basis of different forms of incentives for businesses that might not be good for the general population, and we should keep that in mind as well. Because the benefits for normal people for having such an e-residency are also in the nearer future to come not really there in a different country. Yes, obviously it's nice to have my own EID in my country for interacting with my government, but opening an e-residency account in Estonia is just not attractive for me as a person.
Alex.
Sure. So, I guess I can address maybe your concerns. You mentioned, going forward, if we have a situation where competition is bad, and I personally don't see it. I don't see where that could be bad. I see countries competing for e-residents and e-citizens and all certain different levels of what they're offering to people, and then I see this forcing people's own countries to step up their own game, if you will, and improve their own services. And of course, I think you're right. For e-residency, the main benefit so far has been the ability to start a business in Estonia. And some people say, well, is that the only thing you can do? And yes, that's a fair criticism. I think at the moment we're still figuring out what exactly this means. Estonia is the first country to offer something like this, where they're allowing people from around the world to access their infrastructure and apply to become an e-resident. So we're still figuring out what this really means. But I would say that I wouldn't discount the business environment here. I work with people every day in places like India, Ukraine, Turkey, entrepreneurs who need access to an infrastructure to successfully run a global business. And Estonia, by opening their infrastructure to these people, are really providing a solid solution and really impacting their lives and giving them the tools they need to be successful. And it's just really, really great to see.
I'm gonna very quickly jump in because I just want to make clear the point I was trying to make. What if we have now 10 different countries that offer that for everyone to open your business in that country for the EU market, for example, and now the first one starts giving you a tax credit because then there is an incentive to go there. And there you go, and you start that spiral, and you will have to have legislation in place to stop that, and like international cooperation, which the EU is traditionally bad on when it comes to taxes, and other forms of social regulation. So there you go.
Sure. Just really quickly. So I would say, for the taxation issue, Estonia. One difference is Estonia is not Panama. And many of these problems already exist. I think there already are countries competing for businesses and offering different tax incentives, whether it's Ireland or what have you. But actually, I think things like e-residency are actually solving this problem because it's opening this up to more people. In the past, you had to be very wealthy to sort of start your company in another country and offshore and access these tools. But with e-residency, things like e-residency, you can be just a one-man company and start a business and choose which jurisdiction to start your company. And as far as taxes, actually in Estonia, we want to share our taxes, I think, with other countries. For example, if you're an e-resident and you're creating value in Germany, we want to have an agreement with Germany to make sure that the fair share of the taxes is spread amongst the countries where the value is created. So I do think it's the opposite sort of problem of an offshore. We like to think of it as being an onshore program, if that makes sense.
So what would be the perfect digital society for its citizens, Sandra? We are wrapping up.
The one I live in now?
Yeah, Estonian one, sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no digital fairy tale. It doesn't exist. We'll never know. I mean, we come up with new solutions, new problems occur. But, what brought us here doesn't take us forward. So you can never have a standstill. You always must go forward, you adopt new solutions, you try and see how it's going, but you have to ensure the take-up. I mean, such as mentioned in Estonia, the ID card is compulsory to anyone over 15 years old, which means that we have 1.3 million people and we have 1.2 something million ID cards. And when you show the people what it makes for them, I mean, I can do my tax declaration in 1 minute. My friend in Germany said that their family has a tax lawyer to do taxes. My friend in the US said that it's the worst time of the year when you have to do taxes. I mean, I don't care. I vote online. 33% of Estonians voted during the last European Parliament elections online, and I trust the system. I mean, it's a slow but steady progress that takes us to the perfect digital society.
Okay, Haris?
I think the main problem is the privacy and the security issues, and the accessibility issues for the people that don't know how to use the digital things, I think. Digital citizenship, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I agree with this last point. So that it's really all about the openness and a space where everybody can have access, so accessibility, but also where everybody feels safe and they are safe to say what they think.
I would just comment and say, from my side, from the e-residency and what Estonia is doing with this program, it's not solving all the problems. It's a very, very small start working towards this issue of what citizenship means and how people have access to services they need, and not just services, but also more generally what citizenship is and participation and all the other issues that we talked about today. I think this initiative of allowing other people to access the country is just the start, and we're going to see more of that, and really start to look at these problems from a higher level and how countries can really, it doesn't really matter where you live anymore, I think, in many ways. And I think Estonia, as other speaker mentioned, is really at the forefront of this, and they have a really good opportunity to lead the charge here.
Big question. If we define citizenship not necessarily by bordered territorial sovereign nations, if we define it as inclusion, participation, access, fulfillment across a lifetime, then we should be measuring our success by how the most disadvantaged members of that society, wherever it may be, manages. And until we measure our success by the most disadvantaged, we are going to go nowhere very fast. Thank you.
So thank you. And we also have a reporter here, Oliana Sula. So I will give you the floor and wrap it up.
So thank you very much, everyone, for your intervention. And also I would like to thank the audience for the questions that you addressed. As every one of us could realize, we are still, Estonians especially, are still very proud about the model that they implemented in their country. And I still believe that this is the best practice to be adopted by many other countries of the world. I would start this resume of our session with one point that Sandra mentioned, that it is not about to copy-paste some kind of system. It's not about to unify how this digital citizenship works, but it's about to make different systems interoperable between each other. So this is the main point. Then we discussed about what is digital citizenship. Does it mean to have digital identity or a digital e-residency? Does it make us a digital citizen? Then we should get back to some redefinition of digital residency itself and digital citizenship also. But this can be discussed maybe in Tbilisi, in the other EuroDIG, or in any other kind of assembly. Then about digital inclusion. So as it was mentioned, if digital inclusion can be defined as participation and accessibility, so how to include people which are marginalized. Then another question to be addressed is how to raise the voice of people, how to make people more participants, let's say, or how to increase the participation. And one last point I would steal your words, Alex, is that if we are going to have more and more digital e-residents, such as you mentioned, Latvia, I think, and Azerbaijan as well, they are kind of trying to implement the same project of Estonia. So how can we regulate competition? This is another issue that can maybe be discussed in the future EuroDIG or in any other kind of meetings. So I hope that every one of us will be a very responsible citizen and a very responsible digital citizen. Okay, thank you very much. And I encourage you to apply for the e-residency of Estonia.
So thank you, Eliana. Thank you also, panelists. Thank you, our remote moderator, organizing team, our group behind there who is making all the magic for us. Thank you all for coming. And that's it. Again. And also, as this workshop has been held by Estonian Inter Foundation, we thank you also. Thank you.